We've worked hard to create an accurate, polished, and professional business plan for You Got It training. It's been written, edited, reviewed, and approved by everyone who should do so. Now it's time to distribute the business plan to some of the company's stakeholders. We know that using Word, we can do this in a variety of ways, including saving it to a SkyDrive account where it can be accessed via web apps. We can save it to SharePoint. We can also send it via email or even convert it to a PDF. As the saying goes, though, we can go ahead and distribute it the hard way, or we can do it the easy way. And we, of course, want to do it the easy way using some of these tools that Office 2010 provides. What we'd really like to do, though, is we'd like to create a hardbound copy, and we need to create a personalized letter for each person to whom the business plan will be sent. After all, You Got It prides itself on having the personal training touch, and that should extend to our communications as well. So we don't want to have just a regular old form letter that says, "Dear customer," or "Dear vendor," or "To whom it may concern." That's not the way to do good business. So we're going to accomplish this without having to do everything by hand by using a Word letter that has, for the most part, already been completed. We have it open from the Chapter 9 Project Files folder, and it's called Stakeholder Mailing Letter. We're going to utilize Mail Merge, and Mail Merge requires at least two components. It requires a letter, like this, into which we're going to put fields, and it also requires something called a data source. The data source is where the data is that we're going to populate our letter with in which to customize it. It can be an Excel spreadsheet, an Access database table, or a data source created right from within Word, or even Outlook contacts. We then are going to take those fields of information, we're going to intersperse them with static text that we've typed to create our customer letter, and then we're going to have what we want, a customized letter that looks like it was done by hand, even though we could do 2, 50, or 100 of them just as easily. This can actually all be done manually if we were so inclined by using the Mailings tab. In addition, we also can use the Envelopes and Labels options on the left to create those types of things as well. Envelopes and labels are a little special. First of all, envelopes are a specific size and things have to go in a certain place, and labels are a problem because we have to put many of them on a page. However, Word provides templates, for example an Avery 5160 for the most common type of label that most of us use, that allows us to do this very quickly and easily. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to start, and we could again do this manually, first by selecting the recipients and then by constructing our Mail Merge letter. However, if you've never done it before, and because this allows us to go through it progressively, which is nice for training, we're going to choose Start Mail Merge, and from there we can see that we can do letters, email messages, envelopes, labels, something called a directory, which actually used to be called a catalog, which I think might be a better term. A catalog simply allows us to place item after item after item until it fills up a page, instead of one item per page, like we'll do with our letter. I'm actually going to go all the way to the bottom and choose the step-by-step Mail Merge wizard. The first step, of course, is to say what kind of document are we going to create, and they're all here. We're going to do a letter, of course. Envelopes and labels are here, as is the directory. And if you do email messages, the only thing I wanted to tell you is that in order for this to work, we have to have the email address for each contact in our data source. That kind of makes sense, but you'd be surprised how many people start and then realize they don't have the information they need. We'll go ahead and leave it with letters, and then we're going to click Next at the bottom. At the bottom, we can see that there are 6 steps. We're on step 1 of 6. And using the links here, you can move backwards and forwards through the process. We already have the document we want open, so we'll say use the current document, but we could also start from a template or start from another existing document. Once again, we simply have to say next, and see how easy this is. We're already on step 3. Now we need to determine what our data source is. We can use an existing list, we can select from our Outlook contacts, or we can even create a brand new list right here within Word. It basically is just going to open up an interface with the most common fields. Let us pick and choose which fields we want and we fill it in. It's actually very easy. In business, I find that unless you're just doing a brand new, very small mailing, most of us have a data source somewhere else. We actually are going to use an existing list, so we'll come down and click on Browse in order to find the file. We need to come into our project files, and we'll do so by going to the desktop. Then, of course, we'll be looking for our project files folder. And we'll want to come into Chapter 9. Here there are several files. What we want to do is we want to take a look at the You Got It stakeholder contact info. It should be an Excel spreadsheet. We'll give that a double click. Depending on the type of data source you have, you may need to answer more questions. For example, if you're using an Access database, you need to tell it which table or query has the data in it. In this case, we're using a workbook, and a workbook could have multiple worksheets. It's always helpful if you've named the worksheets, and in this case we have. We want the worksheet called Stakeholders. It's also important to make sure that if you have labels along your top row, that we have the checkbox that says first row of data contains column headers, so those aren't considered people that should be receiving our letter. We'll go ahead and say OK, and it brings up a box that allows us to go ahead and not only see but also manipulate what's included. For example, with the check mark, we can simply choose to include or not include certain people. We also can use the column headings to either sort or to filter for any one of these fields. So if we only wanted people who came under a certain category or who were from a certain state, for example, all of that can be accomplished right here at the top of this box. You also could use the sort and the filter options down below if you want to get a little bit more carried away with it. We're not going to do any manipulation here, so we'll simply say OK. If you ever want to get that box back, you can use the Edit Recipient List, or you can use Edit Recipient List from the ribbon to do exactly the same thing. Now we're ready to go to Next, which is our fourth step, and we're going to write our letter. Well, our letter has actually already been written. What we need to do is we now need to take fields from our data source and populate our letter with them. And I've tried to kind of make it obvious where we want to go by putting in some placeholders in our document. Starting below the date, we have an area that says Salutation. Now we could certainly type in here, and it's important to remember that when you type and you work with fields, you have to make sure that you put in all of the spacing and punctuation. Fields do not include spacing, so for example, you need to put spacing before and after them so they don't run together. Fortunately, we can do things either with individual fields or with something called a block. For example, we could do an address block that includes the address, city, state, and zip all in one. We have a similar option for greeting line. What you will see is that it's context sensitive, meaning depending on the area that you're in, the language that you speak, and the countries that you're working with, this stuff will change. You can choose a salutation. You can choose how formal you want to be. You can choose the punctuation that follows. If we don't have a recipient name, we can even say what we want to put instead. We can leave it blank, or in this case we'll use a simple "to whom it may concern." You can then use the buttons down below to actually preview that using your own data. That's always helpful. If you have fields that don't match the fields here, for example, if you called your field F name for first name and it's looking for one that's spelled out, you can use Match Fields to match all of your fields to what's built into Word. We'll go ahead and say OK, and what you see now is that we have a similar type of placeholder or field to what I tried to type. Mine was just typed with the less than, greater than sign. You can't do that. This is actually a field, and if you actually try to click on it, you will select it and see that it's a field. I think you get the basic idea, but I also wanted to show you how you can insert individual fields. Again, we'll select one of the placeholders that we have. This one's for relationship. Press Delete, and then we're going to go up to the ribbon. We have address blocks and greeting lines here, just like we do in our wizard, but we're going to choose Insert Merge Field, and all of the ones from your data source will be here. We have a field called Relationship, so we put that in. Then we'll come down to the very last line where it says that we want to have a date based on the date we started a relationship with this person. That again is just one of our fields, so insert the field and established. We're almost done. All we need to do now is go ahead and finish it up. We'll click on Preview Our Letters. We can use this to scroll through and actually see how each of these looks. Dear Brandy, Dear Craig, that's good. With our company as our real estate broker, and that's where I notice maybe I have a problem. See how here we don't have spacing between the word our and the field that we inserted? So we definitely want to fix that. We'll simply click after the R, press the space bar, and that's why it's so important to make sure that you preview everything before you actually complete the merge.